A starving widow hides in a broken cabin with her newborn. When all hope fades, a knock on the door changes everything. But trust is the hardest thing to give when you've lost everything. The wind had a cruel edge that night. It cut through the rotted seams of the log cabin like knives, stirring the thin blanket draped over the mother and her baby. The child whimpered, lips trembling, cheeks red from the cold. The fire had died hours ago. There was no more wood, no more food, no more strength in her limbs, just fear, hunger, and the ache of being forgotten. Her name was Clara Bell, 22, widowed by a mining accident the town never even investigated. No funeral, no grave, just a body thrown in with the rest of the men after the tunnel collapse, and a letter handed to her with a misspelled name. 2 months after that, she gave birth alone on a cabin floor, blood soaking into old rags, her screams swallowed by the blizzard outside. Now Clara pressed the baby against her chest, hoping he could draw some warmth from her, though she felt like a ghost already. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. She hadn't dared go outside in 3. The baby, Daniel, was only 6 weeks old. Her milk had slowed. She prayed every night it wouldn't stop altogether. Sometimes she chewed on leather scraps or pine needles just to fool her mouth into thinking there was food. Sometimes she boiled snow in the old kettle to sip something warm, pretending it had flavor. It didn't. Clara stared at the door. Every gust of wind rattled it. Every creak in the logs made her flinch. No one knew she was here. She'd left town after a woman in church whispered too loud about how some widows can't pull their own weight. The town didn't want her. She had nothing to offer. She was thin, unskilled, and now burdened with a baby. Nobody needed her. Not even God, she sometimes thought. But then she'd whisper a prayer again anyway because it was all she had left. That night the storm thickened. A howl outside made her clutch Daniel tighter. Coyotes. She'd seen them last week sniffing the trail. They hadn't dared approach then, but if they got hungry enough, Clara's breath hitched. The fire was truly gone. Her hands shook. The cold crept into her chest like ice. Daniel stirred and started to cry again. "Shh," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Mama's here." But what did that mean anymore? Just that she was the one watching him starve. Then 3 knocks, sharp, strong, not the wind. Clara froze. A 4th knock. She blinked, heart slamming in her chest. No one should be out here. No one knew about this place. She hadn't seen a soul in days. She hadn't even dared light a candle at night. Another knock, firm, measured. Clara rose slowly, her body swaying. She wrapped Daniel in the last blanket, tucked him in a basket near the hearth, and crept to the door. She reached for the iron latch with trembling fingers. Her breath clouded in front of her. "Who's there?" she called through the crack in the wood. Silence. Then, "Don't be afraid, ma'am. Name's Abram Dorsey. I saw smoke from the chimney 2 days back. Been bringing supplies to some folk over the ridge. You ain't been to town lately. Folks wondering what became of the widow." The voice was deep, calm, not too old, not too young. Clara hesitated. "I don't have anything worth taking," she said, "and I don't need your pity." There was a pause. "I didn't bring pity, I brought food." Clara's breath caught. She clutched the door, pressed her head against it. "I won't let you starve," the voice added, quieter now, "if you'll let me in." She looked back at Daniel, who was hiccuping now, little cries soft and confused. Her knees nearly buckled. Without another word, she lifted the latch and opened the door. The snow poured in like smoke, and behind it stood a man wrapped in a thick coat, wide-brimmed hat dusted in white. He had a bag slung over his shoulder, and behind him, tied to a post, stood a mule carrying bundles. Abram Dorsey stepped in without pushing, without crowding her. His eyes scanned the cabin quickly, its emptiness, the dead hearth, the baby by the wall, and his face shifted. Something softened, something steadied. "I'll only stay a moment," he said, kneeling to set the bag down. "I brought flour, dried meat, some beans and oats. There's lard, too, and I got milk in a bottle, goat's milk, in my coat." Clara stared, her lips parted. "Why?" "Because you got a baby, and nobody should starve while other folks got plenty. He pulled the bottle from his coat, still warm from his chest, and handed it gently to her. She took it, her hands shook. "Sit," he said, "feed him first." She nodded dumbly, sinking to her knees. Daniel latched to the bottle with weak, eager gulps. Clara blinked fast, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "I ain't here to fix everything," Abram said, still standing near the door, "but I can help, if you let me." And just like that, Clara realized how close she'd come to dying with her son in her arms. She looked up at Abram. "Why'd you come now?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because I prayed last night I'd find someone who needed me, and I think that was you." The words cut through something inside her, something frozen. He wasn't trying to own her. He wasn't asking anything in return. Just a man with a mule, a bag of food, and a heart that hadn't been hardened by this cruel world. "Thank you," she whispered. But as soon as the warmth began to return, she realized he might be the only man willing to help, and that meant if something happened to him, she and Daniel were lost again. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steadier now. "How far can I trust a stranger with a kind face?" Abram didn't flinch. "That depends," he said, meeting her gaze. "How far can you trust yourself to survive without help?" She swallowed hard. Outside, the wind screamed louder. And far off in the woods, something howled back. Abram turned toward the sound. "I'll need to stay the night," he said. "That storm's turning." Clara looked down at Daniel, then at the man. She didn't nod, she didn't protest. She just whispered, "Then you better help me light the fire." Because the dark outside was nothing compared to the dark that had settled in her soul. And maybe, just maybe, this man could keep both from swallowing them whole. Abram Dorsey knelt beside the hearth, brushing away the old, crumbled ash. Clara watched from the rocking chair, her baby pressed to her chest, his tiny belly fuller than it had been in days. Daniel had fallen asleep against her shoulder, milk dribbling at the corner of his mouth. The little bottle, still clutched loosely in her hand, was empty. "You got a flint?" Abram asked gently, brushing the last of the soot aside with a folded scrap of cloth from his bag. "No," Clara murmured, blinking hard. "My husband took it with him that last day. I never thought—" She cut off and looked away, lips pressing into a line. Abram nodded, respectful of the silence. He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn tinderbox. "We'll get this going first, then I'll patch your window." "You notice that?" she asked, startled. "Cold don't get in unless it's invited," he said with the faintest hint of a smile, though his tone stayed gentle. "There's a crack in the northern pane. Wind's been talking through it." She didn't smile back, but something in her chest ached less. The fact he'd seen something she hadn't meant he hadn't come just to play savior. He was looking, noticing, thinking. He struck the flint. Once, twice. Then sparks caught and a thin curl of smoke rose from the kindling he'd built in the old stone hearth. Clara watched, mesmerized, as the first fingers of flame danced upward, swallowing the twigs and dry bark he'd brought in from his mule's pack. The fire built itself slowly, breath by breath, flickering into life like a blessing returned. The warmth crawled across the room inch by inch. Clara exhaled, as if she hadn't breathed in a week. Abram didn't look back at her yet. He fed the fire, then reached again into his bag. "You got pots? I'll boil some oats." She hesitated, then motioned with her chin to the shelf behind her. "Only the one, the blackened one, it ain't much." "It'll do," he said, retrieving it without judgment. He moved like a man used to quiet spaces. Efficient, sure-handed. She didn't know if he was always this calm, or if he was simply being careful around her. Either way, it didn't matter. She hadn't had another adult in this cabin since she buried Jonah's. And right now, someone moving with confidence and purpose made her feel not safe exactly, but less like the world was ending. He poured snow from a leather pouch into the pot, then hung it over the fire with practiced ease. That mule, Clara said suddenly, startling herself with the sound of her voice. You said you've been bringing supplies to folks. He glanced at her, not pausing his work. Old man Greeley up the ridge, lost his wife last year. Don't move so good anymore. There's a blind woman 3 miles west of here too. I trade meat for thread with her. She sews by feel, beautiful work. Clara blinked. You help all them, why? Abraham's eyes finally met hers. Because I was raised better than to watch folks go cold. There was no pride in it, no bragging, just fact. Clara looked down at Daniel, brushing a finger against his cheek. You married? No, ma'am. Children? No. She watched him for a moment. Why not? He stirred the oats and didn't answer right away. Then, I spent too long riding fence lines and driving cattle to remember how to ask a woman for more than directions. A pause. Truth is, I buried a girl once, years ago, before I had anything to offer, never tried again. The silence stretched, not awkward, heavy yes, but honest. What was her name? Clara asked, surprising herself again. Sophia. Clara whispered, pretty. Yeah, Abram said quietly, she was. Clara's chest tightened. Not out of jealousy, no, not that. But something about the way he said it made her think of how she once spoke of Jonas, before he became a memory trapped beneath stone. The smell of cooking oats filled the room. Clara leaned forward, watching the steam rise. You really brought all that just because you saw smoke? I brought it, Abram said, lifting the pot and setting it on a cloth. Because when you see smoke in the mountains in the dead of winter, it usually means someone's desperate enough to risk being seen. Clara blinked. I figured it was either a hunter, a fugitive, he continued, spooning the oats into 2 bowls, or a woman with nothing left but hope. And if it had been a fugitive? I brought a rifle too. She stared at him. But I'm glad I didn't have to use it, he added softly. Clara lowered her gaze. I don't trust easy. You don't need to, not yet. He handed her a bowl. The scent hit her like a punch. Clara's hands trembled. She hadn't eaten a hot meal in she couldn't remember. Slow, he said gently. Your stomach ain't ready. She nodded and took the first spoonful. It tasted like heaven. She ate slowly, Daniel still dozing in her lap. Abram sat across from her, eating his own portion in silence. When she was halfway through, she looked up at him again. Why do you live like this? She asked. Helping folks who can't pay you back, riding through snowstorms, sleeping in strangers' cabins. He set his bowl down. Because someone once did it for me, a long time ago, when I had nothing. She waited. I was 12. My father had gone off looking for work, never came back. My mother died coughing up blood. I spent 3 days in a shack before a man named Harlan found me. Never asked who I was. Just wrapped me in a coat, gave me stew and said, no one was meant to suffer alone. He didn't live long after that. Fever took him, but I've been trying to live like him ever since. Clara swallowed her food hard. Daniel stirred in her lap, letting out a sleepy sigh. You think you'll go back to town? Abram asked. Her face hardened. They don't want me there. He raised an eyebrow. Not since Jonas died, she continued. They think I'm a burden, or cursed. A woman alone with a child is always a weight in small places. Maybe, or maybe they're just cowards pretending to be righteous. Clara looked at him. You really talk like that? Only when I mean it. She wanted to laugh. Instead, she wiped her cheek and set her bowl aside. You should sleep, she said, rising. You said you'd stay the night. I'll take the floor, he said quickly. You and the baby keep the bed. Clara hesitated, then nodded. He took off his coat, folded it into a pillow, and laid a bedroll near the fire. She carried Daniel into the small back room, tucked him in, then stood in the doorway watching Abram settle. You got enemies? She asked suddenly. He looked up, not that I know of, why? because kindness like yours don't last long around these parts." He held her gaze. "Then I guess you'll have to help it last." She stepped back into the shadows of the doorway. "You sleep too," he added, voice softer. "I'll be here when you wake." Clara didn't answer. She closed the door to the bedroom, leaned her back against it, and slid down to the floor, heart racing. She didn't trust him, not fully, not yet, but for the first time in weeks she wasn't terrified of what morning might bring. And then, a thump outside. She froze. Abram sat up. His hand slid toward his rifle. Another thump. He stood, moving toward the window. The mule let out a sharp bray. "Something's out there," he whispered. Clara stepped forward. "What?" He peered through the gap in the curtain. "Someone just untied my mule." "What?" He turned, grabbing his coat. "Stay inside, bolt the door, don't open it for anyone." Clara's hands trembled. Who would? But Abram was already outside, rifle in hand, snow swirling around him. Clara ran to the window, heart slamming in her chest. She saw Abram vanish into the trees beyond the trail. And then a gunshot. Her breath caught. She clutched Daniel's blanket to her chest, praying with every inch of her soul. Outside, the wind howled louder than ever. The single gunshot echoed through the trees like thunder cracking against stone. Clara staggered back from the window, blood draining from her face. She clutched Daniel tighter, heart pounding hard enough she thought it might give out entirely. For one long second she could not move, could not think, could not breathe. And then she was running. She laid Daniel gently in the makeshift crib Abram had padded earlier with his coat, then flew to the door and slid the bolt into place. She double-checked the hinges. They were loose. The top one had started to warp from the cold and moisture. If someone wanted to force their way in, it wouldn't take much. She looked around wildly. There were no weapons. Jonah's had taken their only hunting rifle the day he died. She had a dull carving knife in the kitchen drawer. Nothing more. Another sound, muffled, a crunch maybe, snow under boots. Clara dropped to the floor and crawled to the side window. She pushed the corner of the curtain aside just enough to see the trail. Nothing. Just darkness, the skeletal outline of trees against the swirling white of snow. Then movement. A figure stumbled out from behind a pine tree, arms wrapped around their chest, limping. Clara's breath caught. It was Abram. She leapt to the door, hesitated only long enough to unlock the bolt, then flung it open. The cold slapped her in the face, but she barely felt it. Abram stumbled inside, panting, rifle still gripped in one hand, the other pressed against his ribs. "What happened?" she asked, slamming the door shut behind him. "Two men," he said, breathless. "Tried to take the mule. I scared one off. Got a shot in the leg of the other. Think he's still out there bleeding." Clara's eyes widened. "Are they from town?" Abram shook his head. "No, drifters maybe, desperate ones, didn't say much." "You're hurt," she said, reaching for him. "Not bad," he grunted. "Just bruised. The one I fired at tried to club me with the butt of a rifle, caught me in the ribs." "Sit," she ordered, guiding him toward the chair. "You're wheezing." Abram chuckled faintly, then winced. "Yes, ma'am." She helped him into the rocking chair. He sank down slowly, groaning under his breath. His coat was soaked through, his gloves nearly frozen. She pulled them off, set them by the fire, then helped him unfasten his coat. "You didn't shoot to kill," she said, not a question. "No," he replied, eyes watching the flames. "He ran as soon as the shot hit his leg. I wasn't about to chase him through the dark, and I don't kill unless I have to." Clara looked at him, something tightening in her chest. "You could have died out there." "I could have," he agreed, "but I didn't." She rose, grabbed a cloth from the shelf, and dipped it in warm water from the pot he'd boiled earlier. Then, carefully, she pressed it against the growing bruise on his side. He flinched but didn't stop her. "I told you before," she said quietly, I don't trust easy. I know, but I want to. He met her eyes. I want to believe there are still people like you, she continued, voice low. That someone would knock on a stranger's door not to take, but to give. But I've lost everything, Abram. My husband, my home, my place in town. And now I have a baby who cries himself hoarse and a heart that don't know how to hope. He didn't speak. He let her words hang in the air, heavy and raw. She finished cleaning his side, then sat back, breath shaking. Then let me help you learn again, he said quietly. She stared at him. You don't know what you're offering. Yes, I do, he replied. I've seen that look in the mirror, the one you're wearing now. They sat in silence, save the occasional crackle from the fire. Clara's voice was thin when she spoke again. I buried Jonas myself, in the field out back. I covered the grave with stones so the wolves wouldn't dig. No preacher, no ceremony, just me and the snow. I didn't tell anyone I left town. I just walked, with Daniel wrapped in a blanket and prayers rattling in my throat. You're stronger than most, Abram said. No, she whispered. I was just too stubborn to die. That's strength. She didn't argue. Outside, the wind shifted, less howling, more rustling. I think the worst of the storm's passing, he said. You'll leave then. He looked at her long and hard. Do you want me to? Clara looked down at her hands, calloused and cracked from cold. Then at Daniel, asleep now with a little half-smile on his face, warmed and full for the first time in days. I don't know, she said truthfully. Part of me wants to tell you to go, because if you stay and then leave later, it'll hurt more. Abram's voice was quiet. I don't make promises I can't keep, but I won't vanish like smoke, Clara. If I say I'll come back, I will. She looked up at him. Say it then. I'll come back. Something inside her broke open, not in a painful way, more like a thaw. He stood slowly, favoring his ribs, and moved to the fire. He checked the pot, stirred it, then turned to her. Eat more, you need it, for Daniel if not for yourself. She obeyed. They didn't speak again that night. She went to bed with Daniel, and Abram laid his bedroll down again, this time closer to the hearth. Before she fell asleep, Clara opened the door to the small room just wide enough to look at him. He was still awake, staring at the ceiling. She whispered, You sure you're not here to take something from me? He didn't move. I'm here to give something back to the world, and maybe to you if you let me. She nodded once, then closed the door. The next morning, she awoke to the smell of something frying. She rose too quickly, head spinning from hunger, and steadied herself against the doorframe before walking into the main room. Abram was bent over the fire, pan in hand, cooking something with lard. He looked up. Morning. What is that? She asked. Salt pork and cornmeal cakes. Her stomach growled audibly. He grinned and gestured to the chair. Sit, I'll fix you a plate. She did, and within minutes he was handing her the most satisfying meal she'd had in months. The pork was salty, rich, greasy enough to slick her lips. The corn cakes were crisp at the edges and soft in the middle. She moaned around the second bite before she realized she'd done it. Sorry, she muttered. He chuckled, no shame in liking food. Clara's eyes drifted to the door. You think they'll come back, the drifters? Abram's expression sobered. Not likely, not with one of them limping and no mule to steal, but I'll leave you my rifle just in case. You do that? She asked, stunned. He nodded. I have a spare, and you're a mother alone with a baby, that's reason enough. Clara looked down at her plate. I need to ride to town today, Abram said. Check on Greeley, trade for supplies, but I'll be back by sundown if I can. If not, tomorrow morning. Clara's throat tightened. Clara, he said gently, I'll come back. She nodded slowly. I know. He cleaned the pans, repacked his mule, and handed her a folded piece of paper. What's this? My direction. If I don't come back in 2 days, send someone. Who? She asked, almost bitterly. The same town that shut its doors on me. Ask for Sheriff Tomlin. He owes me a favor. She held the paper tight. Don't get yourself killed. I don't plan to, he said with a smile. He tipped his hat and walked out into the snow. Hours passed. Clara spent them gathering wood, using Abraham's hatchet to chop kindling and stack it beside the hearth. She boiled snow for water, fed Daniel the rest of the goat's milk, then held him to her chest and whispered stories about his father. She spoke of Jonas's strong hands, how he'd sing when he worked, how he used to build cradles for other folks, children before they had their own. The sun crept across the sky. By late afternoon, her nerves were fraying. And then, footsteps. Clara flew to the window. Her breath caught. 2 men. Neither was Abraham. One was limping. Clara's blood turned to ice. From the window's edge, she saw them clearer now, 2 men trudging up the trail toward the cabin. One leaned heavily on a broken tree branch, dragging a leg that left a jagged trail in the snow. The other carried a rifle slung low, but not lazily like a hunter, ready, like a man who expected to use it. Neither was Abraham. Her first instinct was to bolt the door. Her second was to grab Daniel and run out the back. But there was nowhere to go. Snow still blanketed the forest. The baby had no strength for travel, and if these men had come looking for revenge, she'd be exposing both of them to a slow, cruel end in the woods. Her hands flew to the kitchen drawer, the dull carving knife. It trembled in her grip as she pulled it free. Then she remembered. The rifle. Abraham had shown her how to load it the night before, had made her practice holding it, sighting it, even if her hands shook. She dropped the knife, crossed to the rifle propped by the door. It was heavier than she remembered. Her hands fumbled the way he said they would. She breathed deep, clicked the bolt, slid in the round, closed the chamber just like he taught her. The baby stirred in the cradle near the hearth, sensing her tension. It's okay, she whispered, kneeling beside him. You just stay quiet for Mama, all right. She draped a blanket over the crib, hiding him from view, then crouched near the hearth with the rifle across her knees. The knock came soft at first, then louder, then a voice hoarse, angry. You in there, lady? You're the one who took in that rancher. Clara said nothing. You fed him, let him sleep by your fire. A pause. He shot me. She held her breath. I got a bone to pick with him, the voice growled. And if he's not here, I guess I'll take payment another way. The second man spoke now, tone rough. She's got a baby, don't she? I heard him crying last night. Clara's heart stopped. Think that'll keep me from getting what I came for, the first one said with a laugh. Come on now, Missy. We don't want to break down the door, but we will. She stood. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. I've got a rifle pointed at the door, she said. One of you already knows how it feels to get shot. You want to feel it again. Silence. Then a laugh. You think you can shoot, girl? I only have to pull the trigger, Clara said. They didn't answer. Snow blew against the windows. The fire hissed behind her. I'm counting to 10, the voice said finally. Then I'm coming in, ready or not. Clara stepped into the center of the room. Her legs were shaking, but her hands were steady now. 1. She raised the rifle. 2. The baby let out a whimper under the blanket. 3. She gritted her teeth. 4. A sound outside. 5. Wait. A third voice, loud, sharp, familiar. That's far enough. Clara blinked. It was Abraham. Then chaos. A shot rang out outside this time, a cry of pain, then shouting, running. Clara rushed to the window again. She saw one man, the limping one, crawling across the snow, hand bleeding from a fresh bullet wound. The other was frozen, rifle in hand, staring down the barrel of Abram's revolver. "I said drop it," Abram barked. The man hesitated. Clara flung the door open. "Don't move," she shouted, rifle raised. The man dropped his gun. Abram kicked it aside, then moved quickly, roping the man's hands behind his back. The crawling one was moaning, slipping in the snow. "Go back inside," Abram called to her. "I've got it." Clara nodded and stepped back inside, heart racing. She closed the door, locked it, and collapsed to her knees. A few minutes later, Abram returned, cheeks red, coat dusted in snow. He looked at her and his face softened. "You all right?" She nodded. "I was going to shoot." "I know. I would've. I know." He stepped closer, his hands still dusted in snow. "They won't be coming back. I tied 'em both to a tree by the trail. Sheriff Tomlin's patrol rides near here once a week. I'll leave a note." Clara stood. Her knees were shaking again. "You could have been killed." "So could you." "I almost was." "But you were." He paused, then added gently, "You protected yourself. You protected your son." Clara exhaled shakily. "I thought I was going to faint." "Then faint now," he said with a faint smile. "It's over." But it wasn't, not really. Not the way her chest still felt tight, not the way the cabin's shadows seemed to hold threats she couldn't name. But something else had shifted too. The weight wasn't all on her shoulders now. Someone else was here, someone who came back. She looked up at him. "You kept your promise." "I said I would." "And you brought more than food." He cocked his head. "What do you mean?" "You brought something else." Her throat tightened. "Hope." His gaze dropped, embarrassed by the weight of her words. "Do you have to leave again?" she asked. "Eventually," he admitted. "But not today, not tomorrow, neither." He looked toward the fire, then back at her. "Unless you'd rather I go." Clara didn't answer for a moment. Then she stepped forward and took his hand. "You can stay." He didn't smile, not right away, but his fingers curled around hers. And for the first time since Jonas had died, Clara felt the space inside her chest begin to warm. That night Daniel didn't cry. Not once. Clara slept in the bed with him and Abram took his place by the hearth again, but there was no longer a wall of silence between them. They talked as the fire burned low. He asked about her dreams if she had any. She laughed, surprised by the question. "I used to dream of a garden," she said. "Jonas promised to build me one, said he'd plant sunflowers by the fence, but he never got around to it." "You could still have it," Abram replied. She shook her head. "The land's too poor here." "Then we'll find better land." She paused. "We?" Abram didn't backtrack. "Yes," he said. She didn't answer, not then, but she smiled into the fire. In the days that followed, Abram built a second door latch. He reinforced the hinges. He taught Clara how to properly shoot the rifle, how to track animal prints near the woods, how to tell the difference between a rabbit trail and a coyote path. He brought her goat milk every morning and smoked meat in the evenings. He fixed the broken stool. He whittled Daniel a tiny wooden bird. But the most important thing he did was stay. He didn't push. He didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. He simply remained. And each day Clara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, God had not forgotten her after all. Then, on the seventh night, just as Clara was rocking Daniel to sleep, Abram stepped out to check the traps he'd laid in the lower valley. He didn't return by dark. An hour passed. Then two. Clara paced the cabin, staring at the window. Outside, snow began to fall again. Then a knock at the door. Soft. Too soft to be his. She took the rifle. Opened it. A woman stood there, soaked, shivering, blood on her sleeve. "Please," the woman whispered. They're coming. I didn't know where else to go. Clara's fingers tightened around the rifle. The woman standing on her porch could barely keep herself upright. Her dark hair was matted to her cheeks, eyes wide with something between terror and shock. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, soaked in blood from the shoulder down. She clutched it, trying to press the fabric together, but Clara could see the wound wasn't fresh. It had clotted some time ago. Her whole body trembled in the cold. "Who's coming?" Clara asked sharply, not lowering the gun. The woman's lips parted, but no sound came out. She blinked slowly, then stumbled forward a step, nearly collapsing. Clara caught her under the arm without thinking, rifle falling against the doorframe. "Please," the woman croaked again. "Don't let them find me. I didn't know where else to go." Clara pulled her inside and bolted the door. She glanced at Daniel, still sleeping soundly in the cradle, then helped the woman to the hearth. The stranger collapsed beside it, curling her body toward the heat. "I need to know who you are," Clara said, voice firmer now, heart thudding fast. "And who you're running from." The woman looked up slowly. She had dirt on her face, a bruise blooming beneath her eye. "My name's Mercy," she whispered. "Mercy Lane." Clara's heart jolted. The name was familiar, too familiar. "You from Ash Hollow?" Clara asked carefully. Mercy nodded barely. "You married to Red Lane?" The woman flinched at the name. "Not anymore. Not since he traded me like a mule and sent me away with 2 of his men. One of them said they'd sell me to a camp near Bitter Ridge. I jumped out of the wagon when they stopped for water. Been running since." Clara's hands were ice. Red Lane. That name had haunted the edges of town for years. A traitor with a reputation for buying silence and breaking women who dared talk back. "You're saying he sold you?" "Bartered," Mercy whispered. "For a new rifle and a saddle. Said I wasn't worth more. I'd stopped bearing him children after the last one died. That made me useless." Clara swallowed hard, throat raw. She looked at the woman, this trembling, broken figure curled by the fire, and suddenly it wasn't a stranger anymore. It was a reflection, a future that could have been hers had Jonas lived longer, or had Abram never knocked. "When did you run?" "2 nights ago." "Has anyone followed you?" "I don't know. I haven't heard horses since yesterday, but—" Clara rose and crossed to the window. The snow was falling heavier now. The trail was vanishing. Still no sign of Abram. "I'll get you something warm to eat," she said, voice quieter. She ladled some of the remaining stew into a tin bowl, carried it back, and helped Mercy sit up straighter. The woman took a bite and sobbed around it, not because of the taste, but because it was hot, because it wasn't stolen, because someone was helping her. Clara sat beside her in silence. "You didn't have to let me in," Mercy said after a long moment. Clara looked at the fire. "A man came to this cabin once with food when my baby was starving. I almost didn't open the door either." Mercy turned to look at her. "That rancher?" Clara nodded. "His name's Abram. He saved us, keeps saving us." Mercy blinked. "You trust him?" Clara's eyes flicked to the window again. "I didn't, not at first, but now." She trailed off. Mercy's gaze followed hers. "He should have been back by now." Clara nodded once. "You think something happened?" "I don't know," her jaw clenched, "but I can't sit here and wait." She stood, crossed to the cabinet, and pulled out Abram's second rifle, the one he'd left before. She checked the chamber. Loaded. "You're going after him?" Mercy asked, alarm rising. "I have to. He wouldn't leave us without reason." "You'll die in that snow." Clara moved to the crib and kissed Daniel's forehead. "Then I die trying." "Leave the baby with me," Mercy said suddenly. "I'll guard him, I swear it." Clara looked at her, saw something fierce there now. Not just fear, not just pain, resolve. The kind of fire a woman gets after clawing her way out of something unspeakable. "Lock the door after me," Clara said. "Don't open it for anyone, not unless it's me or Abram." Mercy nodded. And if it's him who's hurt? Clara turned back, eyes like stone. Then I'll carry him home. The snow stung her face the moment she stepped outside. The wind had teeth again, gnawing at her sleeves, biting at her cheeks. She pulled her coat tight and followed the prints he'd left earlier, barely visible now beneath the new snow. The trail wound through the pines, down toward the low valley where he'd said the traps were set. She kept her hand on the rifle. Every sound made her flinch, a branch cracking under snow, an owl calling from above. Half a mile in, she saw something dark ahead. She ran toward it. It was the mule, Abram's mule tied to a crooked tree, alone, riderless. Her breath caught. Abram, she shouted, voice raw against the wind. Silence. Then a groan. She spun. There beneath a snow-covered log was a boot. She ran. Abram. He was half buried in snow, unconscious, blood on his temple. His leg was trapped under the log. Clara dropped to her knees. No, no, no. She cleared the snow quickly, grabbed his face in her hands. His skin was icy, but he was breathing, shallow and slow. Wake up, she whispered, please. He groaned again, lashes fluttering. Clara, he rasped. I'm here, she sobbed. What happened? Trap broke loose. I tried to get the fox log rolled. I slipped. She looked down. His leg was twisted beneath the weight of the tree. She dug her feet into the snow and pushed. It didn't budge. I can't lift it, she gasped. There's a rope on the mule, he whispered. Wrap it around, other side, pull. She kissed his forehead, then ran. Minutes later, she had the rope wrapped tight. She tied it to a higher branch and used her weight to yank the log up just enough to roll it off his leg. He screamed, arching his back, then passed out again. She knelt beside him, weeping into his coat. I've got you, she whispered. You're not leaving me now. She dragged him to the mule. It took all her strength to lift him across the saddle, but somehow she did. She walked beside the mule, holding Abram steady as they made their way back to the cabin. By the time the porch came into view, she was staggering. The door flung open. Mercy stood there, rifle in hand. You found him. Clara nodded, sobbing now. Get inside, Mercy said. I've got the fire going hot, blankets warm, let's get him in. Together they dragged him to the bed. Clara stripped his coat and boots, checked the leg. Not broken, badly twisted. The bleeding at his temple was shallow. She cleaned it while Mercy made tea. When Abram opened his eyes again, hours later, Clara was beside him. You came for me, he whispered. I told you I would carry you home, she whispered back. He smiled faintly. So you did. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Rest now, she said. Outside the storm raged. Inside the cabin was full of warmth, of life, of three people who had no reason to trust each other but chose to anyway. Clara held Daniel in her arms that night and sang him a lullaby she hadn't remembered in weeks. Mercy sat by the fire, mending a tear in Abram's coat with practiced fingers. And in the quiet between snow gusts, Clara whispered something only God and the wind would hear. Thank you for sending him back to me. The snow didn't stop for 3 days. Not a gentle flurry or a passing winter squall, but a heavy, endless storm that seemed bent on burying the whole world under white silence. Trees bent under the weight. The trail vanished entirely. The mountains disappeared behind a curtain of cold. Clara didn't step outside once. She had no need to, not while the hearth roared and the walls held, not while the three of them clung together in their tiny sanctuary like castaways. Abram couldn't move much. His leg was too swollen, too sore to bear weight. He spent most of his time propped in bed, half sitting, half sleeping, mumbling through half-remembered stories. Clara fed him broth with a spoon, pressed cool cloths to his forehead, helped him sip water between groans. Every time he blinked through the pain and saw her face, He gave her a lopsided smile that made her throat tighten. He never once complained. Mercy took over chores in the meantime. She moved quietly but with purpose, as if the motions themselves grounded her, boiling snow, chopping vegetables, feeding the fire, wrapping Daniel when he cried. At night she hummed old hymns in a voice too soft to belong to someone who'd seen what she had. She didn't speak much of her past, not yet, but Clara could see the grief hanging on her like a shawl, threadbare but not shed. The baby somehow seemed the strongest of them all. Daniel had started laughing in his sleep, chubby arms twitching with dreams. His color had returned. His cries were louder now, more confident, as if he knew someone would answer. He didn't know hunger anymore, or cold. Only warmth, the smell of fire, and the sound of two women and a quiet man who whispered to him between breaths. And yet, even inside that warm cabin, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Not a storm this time. Something else. On the fourth morning, Clara stepped outside. The storm had finally ended, leaving behind a glittering world so still it felt sacred. Snow blanketed everything in smooth waves. Trees glistened with frost. The air was sharp, but no longer cruel. She breathed deep, the first full breath she'd taken in days. Then she saw them. Tracks. Not hers, not Abram's, not Mercy's. Fresh. Boot prints, 2 pairs, headed straight toward the cabin from the western ridge. Her blood ran cold. She turned and ran inside. "We need to talk," Clara said, bolting the door behind her. Mercy looked up from the stew. Abram stirred in his bed. "There are prints outside, 2 men. They came while we were sleeping." Abram sat up straighter, wincing, armed. "I couldn't tell, but they didn't knock. They just walked around and left." "Scouting," Abram muttered, "looking for weakness, maybe waiting for night." Mercy paled. "It's him, Red, or his men." Clara's hands curled into fists. "We're not running, not again." Abram nodded. "We won't, but we'll need a plan." He motioned to the map he'd drawn the day before, a crude sketch of the cabin and the forest around it. Clara brought it over. Abram circled the western ridge. "If they come from here, they'll have to pass the frozen stream. That slows movement. We set traps, loud ones. Tin cans, glass, anything that rattles. Then we build a signal fire pit nearby. Dry kindling under snow. If I can't walk far, I can crawl. I can make noise." "You'll do no such thing," Clara snapped. "You can barely stand." Abram looked up at her, and something in his eyes made her falter. "This isn't about pride," he said. "It's survival. We all do what we can." "I want to fight too," Mercy said suddenly. Clara turned to her. "Mercy." "I know how to shoot," she said quietly. "Red taught me, said I needed to know how to kill wolves. I didn't know he meant men." Clara nodded. "Then we fight." That night they prepared. They filled jars with nails and pebbles, tied them to string across the tree line. They poured lamp oil into shallow dishes near the trail, ready to light. Clara spent hours carving stakes and hiding them under snowdrifts near the back ridge. Mercy loaded the rifles with steady hands. Abram wrapped cloth around the broken window pane and taught them both how to reload quickly. Daniel slept through most of it. Clara watched her baby and wondered what kind of world she was building around him. Would he remember these days? The hunger, the cold, the way her hands shook when she held a rifle, or would he only remember the warmth, the laughter that had begun to return to their evenings, the way Abram made him gurgle by pretending to sneeze? She prayed earnestly, for the first time in a long time, that it would be the latter. Just past midnight, the cans rattled. Clara shot upright. Abram already had the rifle in hand, jaw clenched. Mercy peered through the shutter, her breath fogging the glass. "They're here," she whispered, "2 of them." Clara crossed the room and lit the first dish of oil. The flame caught quick, casting long shadows against the wall. A voice called from outside. "Mercy, you in there, girl? Red says come home. Mercy's face went pale. Clara stepped beside her. You know him. That's Lyle, one of Red's cousins. Armed? Mercy nodded. Always. Another voice, rougher, crueler. You got 5 minutes, Mercy. Else we light the place up. Ain't no need for the rest of 'em to burn, but we'll do what we have to. Clara moved to the window and shouted, This cabin has 3 guns pointed at you. You light a match, you'll be lit up first. Lyle laughed. We ain't afraid of no starving widow or her crippled man. Mercy shouted now, voice trembling. You take 1 step closer, Lyle, and I swear I'll send you to hell myself. Silence. Then a shot. The glass shattered near the corner of the window. Clara pulled Mercy back and fired through the crack. The shot echoed loud. A scream followed, short, sharp. Clara didn't stop to think. She flung open the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. Lyle was crawling backward in the snow, clutching his leg. The other man was nowhere in sight. You're not taking her, Clara said, stepping closer. And you're not taking anything from this house. You hear me? Lyle whimpered, dragging himself toward the trees. She's Red's wife, he howled. She's a free woman now, and if Red wants her back, he can come himself. Clara fired once into the snow beside him. He screamed and scrambled into the trees. Silence fell. She stood there a long time, waiting. Nothing. Then the wind picked up, sweeping the tracks away. She stepped back inside. Abram had struggled to his feet, braced against the wall. Mercy was crying quietly, rocking Daniel. Clara closed the door and bolted it. Abram looked at her. I can't leave, Clara said gently. Why not? She stepped over to Daniel's cradle and knelt beside it. The child stirred, then sighed, his tiny fists curling in his sleep. Because everything that matters to me is in this room, she said. Abram's gaze dropped, then returned to hers. I thought I lost it all when Jonas died, Clara went on. I thought there'd never be warmth again, never be a full belly or a kind voice or someone I could trust. But this cabin, these walls, they held me through the worst. And then Abram came. And you. And somehow this place became more than what it was. Mercy nodded slowly. Then I'll come back one day. Clara smiled. We'll be here. By midday, Mercy had packed the few things she owned into a satchel. A spare pair of boots Abram had given her. A wool scarf Clara had knit in the long, quiet hours of early winter. And the wooden bird Abram had carved for Daniel. She cradled it as she hugged Clara goodbye. You gave me back my name, she whispered. Clara held her tight. You gave me back my strength. When it was time to go, Sheriff Tomlin helped her onto his horse. She sat tall, chin lifted, eyes glassy but clear. I'll write, she promised. You'll always know where I am. Don't forget us, Clara said. Never. And then the horse turned, and Mercy rode off down the trail, the wind lifting her scarf like a flag. Abram stepped beside Clara, his arm brushing hers. She'll be all right, he said. Clara nodded. She's got her fire back. You gave it to her. Clara turned to him, eyes searching. You never asked anything of me, she said. I never needed to. You helped us before I had a name. You had a name. I just waited for you to remember it. She smiled, tears forming. I was afraid to feel anything again. I know. But I'm not anymore. Abram didn't move. He just waited, patient still. I don't want you to leave, Clara said quietly, ever. His jaw twitched. Say that again. She stepped closer. I want you here, not just through the storm, not just till spring, always. He swallowed hard. Then I'll stay. She reached for his hand and placed it against Daniel's sleeping body. I want him to grow up knowing what it looks like when a man shows up, she whispered. When he keeps his word, when he gives more than he takes. Abram's throat bobbed. You honor me too much. No, she said, not enough. He took her hand. And for the first time in a long time, no one was rushing. No one was running. No one was starving. Spring came early that year. The trail cleared. The streams thawed. Clara planted seeds in the back garden, the one Jonas had once promised her. Abram tilled the soil while Daniel watched from a sling on her back. They built a fence with crooked nails and uneven slats, and they laughed when it wobbled in the wind. Neighbors came too, not from the town but from the hills. An old woman who raised goats, a boy who'd lost his parents in the last frost, a family of 3 looking for shelter until their roof was mended. They came quietly, cautiously, and Clara let them in. Because that's what Abram had done for her. That's what Mercy had done for Daniel. That's what a home was now, not a place but people. One morning in late May, Clara stood at the edge of the garden, Daniel on her hip, watching the sun rise through the pines. Abram stepped beside her, mug of coffee in one hand, the other wrapped gently around her waist. I keep thinking about that day, she said. Which one? When you knocked on the door, when I thought you were danger. I was, he teased softly, dangerously persistent. She chuckled. You could have walked away. I almost did, when you said you didn't need my pity. And now? He leaned down and kissed her temple. Now I pity the man who never gets to see this view. Daniel babbled something unintelligible, then slapped her chest with his little palm. Clara laughed. He's got your mouth, Abram said. And your stubbornness. Bad mix. Dangerous mix. They stood in silence for a while. Then Clara turned to him, voice low. Would you marry me? Abram blinked. I know it's strange, she said quickly, me asking, but I've waited too long in this world for things to come on their own. I want to raise Daniel with your name. I want to wake up with you on purpose. He stared at her, eyes wide. Then he knelt awkwardly, because his knee still ached, and placed his palm on her waist. I was going to ask you next week. She laughed, tears springing to her eyes. So is that a yes? He nodded. It's always been yes. Daniel squealed and yanked a lock of Clara's hair. She bent, kissed her child, then kissed the man who'd saved them both. And in the distance, the wind carried the faint sound of hooves. A rider. Coming fast. Clara turned, squinting. Someone's coming, she said. Abram stepped beside her, eyes narrowing. I see them. She felt her stomach twist. Not fear, just a deep, aching sense that something was about to shift again. The rider reached the cabin minutes later, breathing hard, dust covering his coat. Are you Clara Bell? He asked. She stepped forward. Yes. He handed her a folded note. From Mercy. Clara tore it open. Her eyes scanned it once. Then again. Her hand covered her mouth. What is it? Abram asked. She's gone, Clara whispered. What? She's missing. Her sister says Red came to Cedar Run last week, said he had papers, said he wanted her back, and now. Clara's breath hitched. She has vanished. Clara's fingers clenched the letter so tightly the edge bit into her skin. Abram reached out, gently prying it from her trembling hand. His eyes scanned the page, brow furrowing deeper with each line. His jaw tightened at the words. We haven't seen her since Wednesday. The back door was open. Her bag was gone, but no one saw her leave. And at the very bottom, he's looking for her. He said he has papers. He said she was never legally freed. Clara stared out past the trail, beyond the garden fence, into the haze of pine trees where sun and shadow tangled together. He took her, she whispered. He waited, watched, and took her. Abram folded the letter and tucked it into his coat pocket. We don't know that yet. Clara turned sharply to him. Yes, we do. Daniel shifted on her hip, picking up on her tension. He let out a soft whine, unsure. She risked everything, Clara said, her voice thick with fury. Ran from that man, nearly died in the woods, built herself back up piece by piece. And now her throat caught. He just comes and takes her again. Abram stepped closer, voice low and steady. We don't let it end like that. She could be anywhere. We'll find her. You can't ride your leg. I'll ride, he said without hesitation. You'll just have to help me up. Clara blinked. You mean it? You said it yourself. She gave you back your strength. Now we give her the same. She stared at him, then nodded. By that evening, Abram had packed his saddlebag with jerky, dried beans, a tin of coffee, and a map of the region marked with possible hideouts and trade routes. Clara wrote a quick letter to the old woman in the hills asking her to come watch Daniel, just for a few days, and placed it in the runner's pouch on the passing courier's horse. The same courier would take news of Mercy's disappearance to Sheriff Tomlin. I'll ride with you as far as the ridge, Clara said, tightening her coat. After that, you'll be faster without me. Abram didn't argue. They both knew the baby couldn't travel that far, and Clara wouldn't leave him behind. But she wouldn't let Abram leave the ridge alone either. That part wasn't negotiable. The next morning, they rode out. The forest was quiet but not peaceful. Every bird call seemed distant. Every rustling branch sent Clara's heart into her throat. By midday, they reached the ridge, overlooking the thin valley trail that led toward Cedar Run. Abram winced as he dismounted. That leg's going to hate me by nightfall. Clara passed him a water flask. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't come back without her. He looked at her, then pulled her into his arms. I won't, he said, even if it takes all spring. Then he kissed Daniel on the forehead, mounted again, and rode down the trail without looking back. Clara stood at the ridge for a long time after, Daniel against her chest, watching until Abram vanished into the trees. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Letters came sporadically. Abram had tracked Red Lane to a small river town called Farpent. Red had left town 2 days before Abram arrived, dragging a woman with him. They'd headed southwest, toward drylands where no sheriff's badge meant anything. Clara's hands trembled as she read the last letter. I'm close. I found a man who said Red stopped at his tavern and drank too much, described the woman. Black hair, bruised cheek. She's alive, Clara. I swear I'll bring her home. She folded the page and pressed it to her chest. A month later, just after dawn, Clara was hanging a line of baby clothes to dry when the faint clop of hooves reached her ears. She turned. A rider was approaching, 2 riders. The second slumped in the saddle, held upright by the first. Clara ran. She reached the trail just as the horses slowed to a stop. Abram's face was sunburned, covered in dust and grime. His coat was torn, his lips split, but his eyes were bright, brighter than she'd ever seen them. Mercy was behind him. Thin, pale, exhausted, but alive. Clara pulled her from the saddle and wrapped her in her arms. They didn't speak, just wept into each other's shoulders as Daniel squealed behind them, clapping like he understood everything. Abram dismounted with a groan and limped over. 3 weeks, he said. 3 towns, 2 broken ribs, 1 black eye, and a broken-nosed outlaw who won't be riding for a while. Clara looked at him, mouth parted in awe. You found her. He nodded. He had her in a shack near Gray Creek, chained. I waited till he left for town, broke the lock and carried her out. You carried her, Clara whispered. Abram shrugged. She's light. Mercy leaned on Clara, sobbing quietly. I thought I was going to die there. I stopped hoping. Clara held her tighter. Not on my watch. They walked the last stretch back to the cabin together. Abram limped slower than usual. Mercy never let go of Clara's hand. That night they lit every lantern they had. Clara cooked rabbit stew. Abram added a pinch of something spicy, and Daniel spit it out dramatically, causing all three adults to laugh so hard it echoed into the woods. Mercy sat by the fire, wrapped in Abram's old coat, hands around a mug. "I want to stay," she said, "not just for the night, for good." Clara smiled. "Then we build another room." "And a barn," Abram added. "We'll need goats eventually." Mercy looked up, eyes wide. "You'd want me here." "Your family," Clara said. Daniel crawled across the floor, clutched Mercy's fingers, and giggled. She wept again, but this time from joy. That spring they expanded the cabin. Mercy and Clara planted sunflowers along the fence. Abram taught Daniel how to walk between the rows, arms wide for balance. Letters came from Cedar Run. Mercy's sister wrote often, promising to visit once the baby arrived. Yes, baby. Mercy was with child by midsummer, carrying the child of a man who'd helped heal her after Red was gone for good. Because that's what Abram had done. He'd gone back. A month after Mercy returned, he rode out again, found Red, faced him in a dusty alley behind a bar in Gray Creek, and left him there bruised and empty, not dead, but beaten in a way that meant he'd never crawl back to the hills again. Abram didn't talk about it. He didn't need to. On a warm day in July, Clara stood before the garden in a simple cotton dress. Daniel was in his best shirt, chewing a butter biscuit. Mercy braided Clara's hair with sunflowers. Abram stood under the oak tree, nervous as a boy. Sheriff Tomlin performed the ceremony. It took 5 minutes, but it stitched together something that had taken a lifetime to build. After the kiss, Daniel clapped. Mercy cried. And Abram whispered into Clara's ear, "I told you, I wouldn't let you starve." She whispered back, "You didn't just feed me, you brought me back to life." And in the hills where hunger once reigned, a cabin now stood full, with warmth, laughter, children, and light. And the widow who had once held her starving baby in the dark. She was never alone again.